On a highway, a black mechanic drives home through a deadly snowstorm with his young daughter asleep in the back seat. But when he spots a luxury SUV stranded on the roadside, he doesn't hesitate. Breaking through the ice-covered window, he pulls an unconscious white woman from the cold. What he doesn't know is, she's a powerful CEO, and this one act of kindness is about to change both their lives forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. The wind howled like a warning through the pine trees lining Route 47, pushing gusts of snow across the cracked asphalt. Malik Brown gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles pale against the worn leather cover. The heater in his old Chevy truck wheezed out barely warm air, struggling against the bitter cold that clawed at the windows. He stole a glance in the rearview mirror. In the back seat, his daughter Nia, only 6 years old, was fast asleep beneath a patchy fleece blanket. Her small chest rose and fell steadily, lips parted just enough to fog up the window beside her. She had her mother's lashes, long and still, even in sleep. Malik's shoulders ached from the day's work. 12 hours at the garage, crawling under busted transmissions, fixing what others had already given up on. His coveralls still smelled faintly of grease and motor oil. But none of that mattered now. They just needed to get home. The storm had come on fast, unexpected even for a Montana winter. The radio crackled with a weather alert, whiteout conditions, visibility near zero, travel only if necessary. He turned it down. It was already too late to turn back. The road ahead was empty, just tire tracks quickly vanishing under fresh snow. Everything around him was white, except for the dark silhouettes of the trees and the slow flicker of his headlights. His mind was already in the kitchen back home, imagining warming up a can of soup for Nia. Maybe a piece of cornbread if he hadn't forgotten to buy milk. Then out of the corner of his eye, a shape, a pulse of orange, blinked dimly on the roadside. Hazard lights. Malik slowed down immediately, easing the truck over as gently as he could on the slick pavement. A black Range Rover sat crooked in the snowbank, its rear tires half buried, engine dead silent. As he drew closer, his stomach tightened. No movement, no sign of life. But the passenger side window was cracked open a few inches, just enough to keep airflow, or maybe cry for help. Malik parked a few feet ahead, shifted into park, and reached behind to tug the blanket a little higher over Nia's shoulder. She murmured something in her sleep. He stepped out into the storm, the cold smacking him full in the face like a slap. The snow came sideways, stinging his cheeks, already soaking through his sleeves by the time he reached the other vehicle. He knocked hard on the driver's window. No response. He cupped his hands, peered inside. A woman sat slumped over the wheel, head tilted forward, unmoving. "Hey!" Malik shouted, pounding harder. Still nothing. He circled to the other side, tested the door. It was locked. The cracked window was just wide enough to wedge a tool through. He sprinted back to his truck, grabbed a crowbar he kept under the seat, and hurried back. Time was no longer on his side. He slipped the flat end into the gap, jimmied the lock with practiced ease. The moment the door clicked open, her body leaned sideways, limp, ice-cold. "Jesus," he muttered, catching her before she fell out completely. Her skin was pale, lips tinged blue, breath shallow, barely there. He didn't stop to think, didn't ask who she was. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest, and half ran, half stumbled back to the truck. Snow pelted them both in sheets, the weight of her like a warning in his arms. Inside the cab, he adjusted the seat, pushed his own coat over her, turned the heat dial to max, though he knew it wouldn't help much. He leaned back, heart pounding, eyes flicking from the road ahead to the fragile woman beside him, to the little girl still asleep behind him. Nia stirred and opened one eye. "Daddy? Who's that?" Malik pressed a hand gently to the woman's icy forehead, then to her wrist. "Someone who needs help," he said quietly. And then he pulled back onto the road, the storm closing in around them. Malik didn't speak much as the truck groaned up the icy hill toward his house. The woman, Claire, though he didn't know her name yet, lay slouched in the passenger seat, her breathing still faint but steadier now beneath his thick work coat. The heating vents rattled like they were struggling just to keep up, but he angled them toward her face anyway, hoping the warmth would pull her back. Every few seconds he'd glance over, watching for signs she was waking up, or worse, fading again. He'd seen this kind of cold before. It didn't whisper when it took you. It waited in silence until you stopped noticing the pain, until your fingers went stiff and your heart forgot it was supposed to beat. Behind him, Nia had sat up quietly, no longer sleepy, just watching. She didn't ask more questions. She could feel something serious was happening. Her dad's hands gripping the wheel tighter than usual, his jaw clenched like it did when money was short or the car wouldn't start in the morning. Their home sat at the end of a gravel road, hidden behind a grove of barren trees, barely visible in the swirl of white. A small, one-story structure with a rusted roof and a porch light that flickered when the wind hit just right. Malik pulled up as close as he could, left the truck running, and rushed around to the passenger side. He opened the door carefully, lifting the woman again into his arms. She didn't resist, but her head stirred slightly against his shoulder, a good sign. Inside the house, the warmth wasn't much better, but it was dry and it was safe. He kicked the door shut behind them and moved straight to the small living room, lowering her onto the couch near the wood-burning stove. The place was modest, lived in. Walls patched with old newspaper, floor creaking in the corners. The scent of pine smoke and old coffee lingering in the air. Malik knelt beside her, tugging off her snow-wet boots and replacing them with a pair of thick wool socks from the basket near the heater. Then he wrapped her legs in a quilt his grandmother had made, edges fraying but still full of warmth. He looked over his shoulder. "Nia, sweetie, can you bring me that thermos from the table?" She nodded quickly, hurrying over with a dinted red container. Malik unscrewed the lid and poured some into a chipped mug. It was just chamomile and honey, but it was hot. He lifted her head gently, pressing the rim to her lips. She didn't take much, but her throat moved. A few seconds later, her eyes fluttered open, glass blue, confused, scared. They locked onto his. "You're okay," Malik said softly, his voice low and even. "You're safe now." She blinked, lips parting, voice hoarse. "Where?" "Clearbrook," he replied. "You were in your car. Passed out. I couldn't just leave you there." She stared at him for a long moment. No recognition, no judgment, just exhaustion. She sank back against the cushions. "I didn't think. I was just trying to get to the lodge. Phone died. GPS sent me off route. Then the engine—" "Shh," he said gently. "Save your strength." Across the room, Nia stood with a blanket of her own, half dragging it across the wooden floor. She paused near the couch, wide-eyed, and looked up at the stranger curled on their sofa. "Is she gonna be okay?" Malik nodded once. "She just needs to get warm." Nia looked back at the woman, then stepped closer, holding out the blanket. "This one's mine," she said proudly. "It's got stars. It's really warm." Claire gave the smallest smile, her voice still a whisper. "Thank you, sweetheart." It wasn't much, just a moment, but it hung there in the quiet like something sacred, two worlds colliding under one roof, the frost on the windows slowly fading as warmth began to take hold. Malik sat back, rubbing his arms. He was still cold, still unsure what he'd just invited into his life. But as he watched his daughter settle next to the woman without fear, only curiosity, something in him settled too. They'd get through the night. Together. The wind had calmed by the time the stove glowed red, casting shadows across the walls like the inside of a heartbeat. Claire sat propped up on the couch now, her color returning slowly, hands wrapped tight around the mug of tea, as if it were the only thing tethering her to the present. She was still cold, but not in danger. Malik had seen enough in his life to know when the worst had passed. The flush coming back into her cheeks, the way she held her shoulders now, not limp but taut, she was recovering. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees, watching her quietly while the storm outside softened into silence. It wasn't his habit to bring strangers into his home, much less white women with $1,000 coats and the kind of skin that had probably never touched motor oil, but something about the way she'd looked behind that windshield, lost, defeated, had dug into his gut, and the girl in the back seat, who still peeked out now and then from behind the hallway curtain, had sealed the choice. Malik would done it again without thinking. Claire took a breath, cleared her throat, then finally broke the quiet. "You didn't even ask who I was." Malik didn't flinch. He leaned back slowly, rubbed the back of his neck. "Didn't seem important." "You didn't hesitate either," she added, eyes narrowing, not suspicious but curious. "You saw me out there, unconscious, in the middle of a blizzard, and just stepped in. You needed help," he said simply, like it explained everything, and to him it did. Claire studied him for a long moment. His broad shoulders, the oil under his nails, the calloused hands that had wrapped her in blankets, fed her tea, and never once asked for anything in return. His face was weathered, not old, but tired in a way she recognized. A man who'd carried too much for too long. His daughter peeked from behind the curtain again. Claire caught her eye and smiled. The girl stepped out, this time with a stuffed bear clutched to her chest. "Is she a princess?" Nia asked again, her voice soft, testing. Malik shook his head, but Claire gave a small laugh. "Not quite," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I work in cars too, in a way." Nia's eyes lit up. "Like Daddy?" Claire's smile faltered, then steadied. "Maybe not exactly like him." Malik stood, walking to the kitchen. He ladled warm soup from a dented pot into a bowl and returned to set it gently in front of her. "It's not fancy," he muttered, "but it'll warm you up." Claire stared at it. Thick broth, chunks of potato, a few pieces of chicken, humble and honest. She looked up again, really looked at him this time. At the walls patched with old maps and garage invoices. At the second chair with stuffing peeking through the cushion. At the photo on the mantel. Malik holding a baby Nia, next to a woman with a bright, tired smile. "You live alone?" she asked quietly. Malik's jaw shifted. "Just me and Nia now?" Claire didn't press. She dipped the spoon into the bowl, tasted the soup, and closed her eyes. It was better than it had any right to be. As from her, Malik said nothing, just watched her eat with a steady calm. She could feel it. Not judgment, not scrutiny, but something else. A stillness, a presence. The storm outside was still there, but in that room it had no power. Only the crackle of firewood, the faint hum of a child's humming, and the weight of something neither of them could name yet. Gratitude, maybe, or understanding. Maybe both. The storm had broken by dawn, leaving the world blanketed in a heavy silence only snowfall could make. Outside the frost-glazed windows, the trees stood still, like quiet witnesses to the night before. The roads were still buried, the world still cold, but there was something gentler in the light that spilled across the floor. Something that whispered the worst was over. Malik was already up, his boots crunching through the snow as he walked back toward the black Range Rover with a battery charger slung over one shoulder and a toolbox in hand. His breath came in short white puffs, jaw clenched against the sting of morning air. The vehicle sat half frozen where he'd found it, but he'd seen worse, much worse. The engine was clean, newer than most, just a victim of bitter cold and a dead battery. Still, he took his time, cleaned off the intake valves, checked the alternator, swapped in a fresh spark plug from his personal stash. He didn't cut corners. That wasn't how he was raised. Inside the house, Claire sat with Nia on the old sofa, both of them wrapped in layers of blankets. A children's cartoon flickered on the tiny TV in the corner, volume low, just enough to keep the girls smiling. Claire wasn't watching. Her eyes drifted to the window every few minutes, searching for the shape of the man who'd saved her, without a single question, without hesitation. A man who still hadn't asked her last name, who didn't treat her like she was made of porcelain or price tags, just a person, cold, human, real. She ran a hand through her hair, still a little damp, then glanced down at the thick mug of reheated tea in her hands. The edges were chipped, but the warmth was steady. She could still feel the ache in her fingers where the cold had sunk deep. Her voice was stronger now, her thoughts clearer. But something lingered in her chest, like a knot she couldn't quite explain. When Malik returned, his boots tracking melted snow across the floor, Claire stood to meet him. He looked at her briefly, then held out a set of keys, his voice as plain as ever. "Should be good now. Battery's charged. She'll start." Claire hesitated, her fingers wrapped slowly around the keys, but she didn't move toward the door. "You didn't have to fix it," she said softly. Malik raised an eyebrow. "Didn't make sense to leave it broken?" There it was again. No fanfare, no conditions, just action. Claire looked down, then back up. "I don't know how to thank you." Malik offered a small shrug. "You don't have to." He turned toward the fireplace, already moving to stoke it before it died down again. But Claire stayed there a moment longer, watching him, trying to say something with her eyes she hadn't yet found words for. A man like him. He didn't trust easily, but he gave everything without asking. She wondered how many nights like this he'd survived alone, how many kindnesses had gone unreturned. Nia ran up and hugged her legs. "Bye, princess," she giggled. Claire crouched down, hugged her back, holding the little girl a second longer than necessary. "You're the brave one, sweetie," she whispered. "Thank you for sharing your stars." Outside, the cold bit at her again, but it didn't feel as sharp. She climbed into her Range Rover, the engine humming to life under her fingers. She sat there for a second, hands on the wheel, eyes on the rearview mirror. Malik stood in the doorway, arms crossed against the cold, watching her go, but not expectantly, just present. Claire rolled the window down halfway. "I mean it, Malik," she said. "I won't forget this." He nodded once. "Drive safe." She lingered one heartbeat longer, then shifted into gear, the tires crunching softly as they rolled down the snow-packed road. In the mirror, the little house grew smaller and smaller behind her, but something in her chest stayed warm, tethered to that porch, to that man, and to the little girl with stars on her blanket. She didn't know it yet, not fully, but the road she was on had already changed. 2 weeks passed, and the snow in Clearbrook had begun its slow retreat, dripping off rooftops, sliding down tree branches in quiet rivulets, pooling into muddy veins along the roadside. Winter hadn't given up, but it was loosening its grip. Malik's days returned to their rhythm. Pre-dawn alarms, oil-stained coveralls, Nia's laughter echoing down the hall as she packed her tiny backpack with crayons and questions. Life had a way of folding the extraordinary into the ordinary, like it had never happened. But there were moments, when he sipped his coffee in silence, when the sun caught the frost just right on the porch rail, when he found himself thinking about her. Claire. The woman with frostbitten fingers, haunted eyes, and a name she hadn't spoken until long after she was gone. He didn't expect anything to come of it. So when the envelope arrived, heavy and cream-colored with no return address, he thought maybe it was a mistake. The name written on the front, his name, Malik Brown, looked out of place. Precise, elegant, too careful to be from a bill collector. He opened it standing right there by the mailbox, the late afternoon sun throwing long shadows across the snow-speckled ground. Inside was a letter, handwritten in dark ink. He unfolded it slowly, as if it might disappear. "Dear Malik, I don't think I'll ever find the right words, but I'll try. That night changed me. You didn't know my name, and still, you opened your door. You didn't ask what I did, or what I could give you. You just saw someone in need and you acted, without hesitation, without pride. I don't know many people who have done the same. My name is Claire Whitmore. I run Whitmore Automotive Group. We have facilities across the country, big buildings, big ideas, but lately I've felt all of it drifting away from what matters. Until that night. You reminded me what decency looks like when no one's watching, what quiet dignity sounds like. You reminded me of who I used to want to be." He swallowed hard, something pressed in his chest, tight, aching, but not painful. The next page was official, a job offer, lead technician and supervisor at a new Whitmore regional training facility set to open in Helena. A real salary, full benefits, flexible hours for single parents. Not charity. And behind that, one last sheet. A payment receipt. his mortgage cleared. The house, old and stubborn and patched together with love and time, was now fully his. No more final notices tucked under windshield wipers, no more quiet calculations between groceries and bills. Malik sat down slowly on the porch steps, the letter crinkling in his hand, the world tilting gently around him. His breath caught. Not from disbelief, but from the weight of being seen, really seen, not as a man struggling to hold it all together, but as someone who'd held someone else up and changed her course. The screen door creaked behind him. Nia ran out barefoot, her curls wild, dragging a stuffed bear by the arm. "Daddy," she called, then stopped short, her face scrunching. "You're crying?" He opened his arms without a word, and she climbed into his lap like it was the most natural place in the world. He wrapped both arms around her, held her close, his voice low but certain. "Yeah, baby girl, I am. A weapon," she whispered into his chest. He pulled back, just enough to look her in the eyes. His own were glassy but steady. Because sometimes, when you do something kind, not for thanks, not for show, just because it's right, it finds its way back to you, bigger than you ever imagined. Nia blinked, quiet for a moment, then smiled. "Like magic?" Malik smiled through the ache in his throat. "Like the real kind." In that moment the sky burned gold and violet across the horizon, and the wind was still. He held her there, on the edge of something new, not just a new job or paid-off house, but the beginning of something harder to name. Dignity, possibility, a future neither of them had dared to picture in full color. Miles away, in a glass tower overlooking a skyline Claire no longer cared much for, she stood by her office window, fingers resting on the same folded thank you note Malik had written her after receiving the offer. It wasn't poetic. It didn't need to be. It simply said, "You didn't owe me anything, but you gave me everything. Thank you." Claire tucked it into her coat pocket before leaving for the day. She had meetings tomorrow and a new training facility to visit. But tonight she would go home remembering the firewood, the soup, the child with stars on her blanket, and the man who reminded her what integrity looks like in the quiet. They had met as strangers, but the storm hadn't just passed. It had built a bridge between two lives, and neither of them would ever be the same. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.